All right, everybody. Oh, counter restarted. Let's go ahead and get started today. Hey, thanks for joining us. We've got a great episode. We're going to talk about one of the seldom tapped superpowers that we have in the way of solving some of the biggest problems, beginning increases in our significant increases in the income that we make, and how it is that we can put ourselves in a mindset, in a position, in a state in which to capitalize on that, how to stand out when we do that. That's through some of the things Dr. Hall will talk about today in the way of meditation, quiet reflection, and just using the creativity side of our brain to operate at the highest level. So with that, I'll make a quick introduction here for Dr. Hall. He's a business psychologist, executive coach, and public speaker, and obviously multi-time author and self-professed neuro nerd. How are you doing today, Dr. Hall?
I am quite well. How are you today, Jared?
I am excellent. We've got I think a great one. I think my perception is an not often enough tapped into resource that we have within our brain to leverage creativity, to problem solve at very high levels, which I think anybody would agree can significantly increase the income we can make by solving the bigger problems. Is that a good way
Yeah.
to kind of summarize that in your experience?
Yeah. I mean, better thinking, better business. What was it? The problems we create today will require a different level of thinking than we had when we created the problems. I think that was Einstein or said something to that effect. So yeah, it really is about changing the way we think. Learning is one piece, but then changing the way we think about how we solve problems is another piece.
Excellent.
And
Excellent.
I look forward to talking about uh, the importance of quiet reflection on creativity, on new ideas.
Excellent, excellent. Well, let's real quick. Let's do some housekeeping items here. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Jared Lee. I'm the associate broker and team lead at MHC Realty. Our sponsor for today is the perfect real estate business. We've spent the better part of a couple of decades developing this out and refining, fine tuning over the last years, in large part in cooperation in support with Dr. Hall, implementing things like business coaching, life coaching, and then also dovetailing in mentoring and training, and then just other facets of the real estate business that continue to evolve, and as well as getting ahead of some of the new things that are coming online that we can take advantage of. Obviously, lead gen is a big one, as well as some more passive type of income in the way of profit and revenue sharing, but we can always talk about that later. But feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be glad to share more about it. But other than that, we'll chat a little bit about the busyness that we typically have in our lives. That if this is a good spot to start, I hope. If not, let me know if there's a better start place. But it seems like the busier we are, the less inclined we are to use this side of our brain. We just don't. It, is that a fair way to look at it? We're not
Yeah,
using our creativity?
yeah. I wouldn't say the side of your brain. I know people like to think about left brain, right brain. When I look at brain scans of people thinking creatively, or in that space where their brains are coming up with new ideas, it isn't one side or the other, but it is a whole different network. Um, so here's the neuro nerd part.
Okay.
Um, there's a technology called functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and in it you put a person in an MRI tube, but you fine tune the MRI machine so that it can tell by the amount of iron in blood flow, if that makes sense,
Interesting.
because iron is magnetic, fMRI is magnetic resonance, so they can actually track blood flow in the brain. So they know what part of your brain is more active, what areas are more active. There's another technology called positron, which they can overlay with MRI and and give us a three-dimensional picture. And my phone is ringing. I'm so sorry.
You're a wanted man, Dr. Hall.
let me turn that off. That was a rookie move on my part. So whichever way they do it, with fMRI, you can get the three-dimensional structure of the brain and overlay where the brain is active at any time. And so they have these people in these MRI tubes looking at lights flashing or looking at pictures or whatever, and you can see they're concentrating on a task and certain parts of the brain are lit up. If it's a visual task, it's the occipital lobe, which is back here. If it's a hearing task, it's the temporal lobes, depending on if it's a speech task or a rhythm and music task. You can see these things happening. But then in between each of these experiments, they would say, well, just rest for a minute. And so there you are in this MRI tube. And if you've ever been in an MRI tube, it's really, really boring, a little bit claustrophobic if that kind of stuff bothers you. But it's really, really boring. There's nothing to do. It's noisy, but there's nothing to do. So these people, what do you do when you're bored? Well, your mind starts to wander. Mm-hmm. And what they noticed is that everybody's brain during the rest period, certain parts of the brain would light up during mind wandering, this sort of rest time. And it turns out that the brain is more active during rest time than it is during concentration time.
Which I think is counterintuitive for most, right?
Well, it's completely counterintuitive. So Billy in the fourth grade, his teacher's saying, Billy, quit staring out the window, concentrate. You got to develop your brain. Well, Billy's brain is developing, but it's developing different stuff. Now, they call this constellation of activity, all this network, they call it the default mode network, which means it's the mode that your brain is in. It's the network. It's the mode that this network is in by default. Gotcha. So when your mind is wandering, it goes to the default mode network. Now, there's some debate about this because some of us, our minds in the default mode network go to bad places.
Negativity and pessimism.
Yes. The worry loop, imagining disasters, all of those things. If you spend too much time in that negative default mode, that's bad. It's bad for your brain. It's bad for your life. But then there are people who have positive mind wandering, where they're thinking about them, they're imagining themselves in the future. They're imagining themselves in relationship. They're imagining that their brain is thinking about the important people in their lives, their future, but it's also the time when ideas come to them, this positive default mode network. And so when you're looking at the positive default mode network, we've all experienced it. Where do your best ideas come from? Where are you when your best ideas come?
Yeah, by yourself, shower.
Yeah, people most say it's in the shower. Well, the reason is you're in the shower, it's warm, it's pleasant, nobody's bothering you unless you have a 4-year-old at the door, let me in. Mm-hmm. Nobody's bothering you, and you know how to do it. So you're really not thinking about the shower. You already know how to wash your hair. And for me, it's really easy. So it doesn't take that long. So it's easy to do. And so your mind starts to wander, and that's when ideas come to you. So that was a very long answer to your question. Because we're so busy, because we're so active, it doesn't seem like we're spending any time in quiet reflection. Absolutely not. We're constantly interrupted. My phone ringing is a great example. There's almost no place you can go where you won't be interrupted by electronics. And as a result, there's also virtually no place you can go where you can be bored. And boredom is one of the critical factors to creativity. You have to be a little bored for your mind to go into the default mode, for your mind to start wandering. Mm-hmm. And if you're constantly peppered with information, it's far more likely to take you on that negative default mode. When you're out in nature, when you're by yourself, when there's nobody bothering you, you're far more likely to go into the positive default mode.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a society now that's so manufacture creativity because nobody's bored long enough.
You were all hyper. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, we're just bombarded. My wrist goes off because my phone goes off, and I'm always,
Yep.
I can't even, I'm not slowed down because I got to look at my watch to see what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an analog watch, and people say, "Are you going to ever get one of the Apple watches?" No, no, I don't need the interruption.
So a couple of things come to mind as you were talking there, and one of them is in my whatever you want to call it, meditation, quiet reflection, what have you. When I just sit in kind of in peace, I've made it a point to try to discontinue thought about anything in particular, like literally try to push out any distractions. Obviously have the watch off, have the phone in focus
Yep.
mode or whatever, and then intentionally try not to think about anything, then start to think about something in particular.
That's a pretty effortful process. Now, what practitioners of mindfulness meditation will tell you is that you get there not by forcing down these thoughts. It's like me saying, don't think about pink elephants. Well, now you're thinking about pink elephants. And so the more you try to force down this thought that you're not allowed to think, the more it comes up. And what people who are really good at mindfulness meditation say is when the thought intrudes, like, oh, yeah, I gotta pay the electric bill. Don't get mad at yourself. Go, oh yeah, okay. That's there, but I don't have to think about that now. And I'm going to push this off.
Yeah.
And it's going to float out into the ether. Then you can go back to your previous thought. What you're describing, Jared, is a really advanced skill of metacognition. Cognition is thinking. Meta means above. It doesn't mean just Facebook. It means over and above thinking. So it's above thinking. It's essentially thinking, monitoring your thinking. And that's what you're able to do. Many people are not able to do that, not because they're fundamentally unable to do it. It's because they practice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I love that distinction because you're right. I couldn't tell myself, don't think, because then you want to think. It was being aware of what I was thinking about and letting it dissipate, letting it do its thing. And I was, trying to prepare for, the conversation around how do you then, and intentionality is tough because you don't want to force it, like you said, but then let a thought enter your mind and then be aware of that thought that you're interested in and processing that, solving a problem, getting to the point where, you've kind of let everything else go away or you've deflected that. And then whether you specifically want to think about a specific topic or just let your mind come up with a topic and then be aware of how that's processing. And I'm getting a little deep here. And I do want to focus on the fact that this is super important because it does a lot of things. The metacognition you're talking about is just, hey, that I am thinking. Hey, this is what I'm thinking about a lot. Hey, is this helpful or not? So that's all super helpful. And maybe I'm getting a little too advanced of how to pick any one thing, but let's go back to the basics, and that is be bored. Find times that you're bored. Let your mind do whatever it wants because it wants to, in my understanding, and you can correct me because you know far more than I do, but it wants to solve problems. If you have a problem like in our space, in our industry, and it's a big problem, one of the best things you can do is quit thinking about a whole bunch of other stuff and let your brain process how to solve that big problem.
Yeah. And our brains are designed to solve problems. That is what human beings are built to do, is figure stuff out. we've created everything on this planet from, and I quote a girl I went to elementary school with, and we grew up together, and I saw her at one of my class reunions, and she says, "Isn't it amazing, Roger? Everything's made out of dirt." And it's a little, I mean, it seems a little simplistic, but if you think about it, like this wall, it's gypsum board that came out of the ground, and the paper covering on the gypsum board came from wood, and the paint came from chemicals that came from the ground. So all of it came from dirt. So, I mean, she really was right. But here's what I'll add to that. It came from these base materials and somebody thinking up a creative way to use them, or somebody figuring out a creative way to connect these things. I have no idea about how somebody invented paint chemistry, right? I don't understand that, but I'm glad somebody did. So it's taking these basic things that come out of the ground or come out of the air or come out of the ocean and combining them in ways. That's all thinking. So it's dirt, it's thinking, and it's effort. And effort's a topic for a whole nother conversation, but our thinking is what solves problems. We've created everything in this world, including the cameras that are and the microphones that are communicating between us. All of that was created out of someone or a group of people's ideas and base elements. So all of our commerce, all of our economy, all of the good stuff in our world comes from our thinking. So if you want to solve a problem, to create more profit, to create more success, it all comes from your thinking. And if you don't manage it, you're going to get pinballed around everywhere and follow someone else's lead.
Yeah, I like that. And in our industry, it's kind of interesting because it's counter. I don't know about intuitive, but it seems like we should address problems outside of our client's knowledge, and to some degree we should, because we don't want to create anxiety. But I would also say that it also helps us help them understand how we're earning our keep. Our commission comes from solving big problems, and to share with them after the problem is solved that we solved a big problem, I think is a good thing to do.
Yeah. It is helpful maybe after the problem is solved to let them know how you solved the problem. It might create anxiety ahead of time because for you, it's an easy problem to solve because you've solved it 1,000 times. It seems insurmountable to them because they don't have a frame of reference.
Yeah, pick your timing that you say that. Don't just throw it on them and then make them worry. But maybe later, like, hey, just so you know, and this came up, and I don't think that's a bad thing because people are wondering. The easier you make it look, are like, well, what did you do? You made this commission on selling this house and you didn't do anything, And it's never the case, but often the case that we don't share what we did. And in real estate, right, it's known that it's never the same transaction, right? Different property, different people, different contracts, different state. I mean, so there's always something that's different that you're going to have to address. And I don't care how good you are, you're almost always going to come across a problem. To what degree the problem is, I don't know, and it varies. Sometimes it's massive, sometimes it's just small. But I think that the better, certainly you get experience and you're good at solving problems. But even if you're not experienced, but you get good at, solving them because lack of experience, I think that begets an ability to earn more income.
Absolutely. And you figure out a different way. It takes mental energy to come up with a creative solution to a problem that you faced 100 times before. Well, that's when you start to really accelerate your business. When you come up with faster ways to solve problems. I'll give you an example. One of my best friends is a mortgage guy. And about once a month, he'll pull an all-nighter. I mean, he's my age. I mean, he's not 19, but he'll pull an all-nighter building spreadsheets that will make his process automatic. So he'll put a number in on the front end, and it'll make everything come out perfectly formatted. Every potential fee, cost, percentage, tax, whatever, will all be automatically computed.
Wow.
So he spends one 12-hour period where he solves a big problem through his thinking that makes his life easier, so he can throughput a lot more work because everything's automatic.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So you help a lot of successful people, and what percentage of the time would you say that this level of, well, two questions. My guess is that most, if not all, are doing these particular things. Spending the time in boredom and solving these problems. Like, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself because I kind of know the answer. You've told me this is what these people do. You know what I mean? Like, if you want to be successful,
you got to do this stuff.
You got to do it. So I'm kind of giving away the answer to my question, but I couldn't help myself. I just find it interesting that it's, again, back to the counterintuitive thing. We think we got to be busy in order to keep the momentum going. And in reality, there's a lot of occasions where we just simply need to slow down so we can make bigger strides. And pedaling faster isn't always a solution.
I've got a friend and a colleague who says you have to slow down in order to speed up. And I was just listening to a book, and the author is a kind of a semi-professional race car driver, and he made the same point. He said, if I'm slow on the track, if my time isn't good on the track, it's because I was going too fast in another part of the track. So I need to slow down in certain areas in order to speed up overall. And so high performers know that slowing down is necessary for great performance. I'll give you an old example. Martin Luther, and I don't mean Martin Luther King, who's a great example for a lot of other things, but Martin Luther decided he needed to translate the Latin Bible into German. And there's some historical controversy. Did it take 3 weeks or 3 months? It doesn't really matter. But he translated the entire Bible from Latin to German by himself, and we'll take the long number, let's say in 3 months.
Okay.
That's an incredible feat. And he said, and for him, prayer was his quiet reflection. He said, I have so much to do today, I must spend the first 2 hours in prayer.
Wow.
So we have this historical figure who created this monumental product in an incredibly short period of time, who spent 2 hours every day in his version of quiet reflection. I've got a client that I work with who's very successful in his field, and he spends time every day. He'll spend 45 minutes in the sauna, then he'll do his red light therapy, and then and he's on his exercise bike, and he's thinking in the sauna and in the red light therapy. All of this time he's using to think. No wonder he's so successful. I mean, he technically doesn't get started working till 10 in the morning. He's been up since 5.
But his mind's going in all kinds of creative directions.
But this guy is incredibly productive. And he's like first or second in his company for his job. And it's precisely because he has these quiet disciplines at the beginning of every day.
So this brings up, and I don't know that I was going to bring it up because I wasn't sure exactly how it was going to fit, but you said something that sparked my curiosity. we've talked about the book Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life before. Brian Tracy. Anyway, but I don't know that we talked about his comments about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the superconscious. Are you familiar with that reference?
Not the super conscience. I think I know where he's going with that, but lay it out for me, and I'll translate into language I understand.
Yeah, well, I'll butcher it, but basically, because I noted it because it was super intriguing to me, but he talks about the superconscious mind being the source of our inspiration, imagination, intuition, and our hunches.
That's the super conscious.
That's in his definition. Yeah, it's this, you know, uh, he references from a faith perspective and a non-faith, whatever you believe in, whether it's a deity or the universe or, whatever. And he doesn't elaborate on it a lot, but he just briefly touches on it because I had not ever heard that term before, the superconscious, which I don't know if he made it up. I don't know where he got it from. I don't know. So that's why I was a little hesitant to bring it up because I hadn't talked to you about it yet. But,
Okay.
but when he said that, I went, oh, I could totally see that in my experience, that when my mind is quiet and I ask for an answer, is it my brain that goes off, launches into the super creativity mode that you're talking about? But, and this is maybe a topic for a whole nother discussion, but is there something beyond that that brings answer? Anyway, I might have derailed this whole thing, and anyway, I don't know.
I mean, what you're invoking is the supernatural, right?
I mean, he says hunches, intuition, imagination. I don't know where those things normally come from. Is that a gut? Is that something beyond gut? I don't know.
I would say I would say some of it. I would say some of that I think we could describe it as in purely natural terms. I'm a believer in the supernatural, but I'm really more of an expert in the natural. So I certainly don't. I certainly affirm that there is a supernatural. That's part of my worldview. The mechanism for that. The mechanism for that I have ideas about, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert on. When you're talking about how our brains work in the purely natural part of the world, there's a lot going on that we don't ever think about. There's an author called Leonard Mlodinow. It's a mouthful.
One, yeah.
It's a Polish name, Leonard Mlodinow, and the last letter is not V, though it's pronounced V. It's W.
Huh.
And he's got a book. He's got a book called Subliminal. I'm looking at it on my shelf, and he talks in Subliminal about what maybe Brian Tracy was talking about the subconscious mind. And there's so much going on in our brains that is out of our conscious awareness and for which we have absolutely no language to describe. And all of those seem like hunches, they seem like intuitions, but they're really data that our brain is taking in and making decisions on outside of our verbal or our conscious awareness. And if we deny that part of our brain is working, we deny the validity of lots of information that is outside of our conscious awareness. So it's tough to connect with that, and it's really easy to confuse guessing with intuition. And maybe we could talk about that another day. But there is so much there. So what he's talking about is conscious, what we know, subconscious, which he calls subliminal. He has another book called Emotional, which talks about the emotions and how they affect our decision making. But then you bringing Brian Tracy's super conscious. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, which invokes a supernatural, which I'm completely okay with. I have ideas about, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the supernatural interaction with the natural. Though I do, well, I guess I wouldn't say I'm expert, but I have some pretty strong ideas.
Yeah, and that's again that could be a topic for a different episode. There's probably a lot
Yeah.
to cover there. Just again came up recently in a book I was reading, but you hit on a point that I find really interesting, and that is getting to the point where you begin to think at the level that we're talking about. I've noticed it almost always consists of removing my emotions from my state of mind. I have to be aware, the metacognition side of how my emotions or my preferences would influence my problem solving as it relates to that situation. Like I
No,
do.
I wouldn't say removing them. I would say bringing their influence into the conscious.
Thank you.
Uh,
Potential
there's
influence.
there's a ton of research that looks at people who have shunted or blunted emotions or are unable to process emotions well, and those people have awful lives. Their decision making quality is in the sewer.
I'm sorry, say that again, Roger. People that have what?
Shunted or blunted emotions
Okay.
who do not have awareness of their emotions
Ah,
to make worse decisions than people who do have good emotional awareness and emotional control.
yeah,
So
because they're letting it influence them too much and not being aware
no,
of.
no, they're not aware at all of the
Oh,
emotional content.
really?
Well,
They're
I mean,
just
think about it. If let's use an example. If I have no awareness of fear, then I will play on the edge of a bridge or on the edge of a tall building.
okay.
How does that typically turn out?
Not well.
Very often, not well. And so, if you don't feel that fear, you're more likely to do a stupid thing.
Mm,
If I don't feel guilt, for example, then I'll do lots of things that regular people would regret and learn from. I don't ever learn from them. So I keep doing stupid things over and over again. So emotions provide the passion, they provide the fire for our decisions, but they also provide the guardrail for our decisions.
mm.
Because if we're not aware of them and we don't regulate them, they can't give us information to keep us from going over the cliff.
Hmm. Wow. So, uh, again, and we're coming up after the 30 minutes, so I'm trying to figure out how to wrap it up. And I think a good way is to re-emphasize in your experience working with, I'm sure, tens or hundreds, if not thousands of successful people over the better part of 3 decades, right?
Something, yeah,
Uh, and I think I hear you saying that almost all have to be in this place of quiet reflection, meditation to get access to the problem solving, or maybe not even problem solving, just better thinking,
yeah,
optimal thinking.
yeah.
And that's not just a few minutes a day. This could be
I mean,
hours a day.
right. Some people do spend hours. But if you're spending zero, going from 0 to 2 hours is,
Tough.
you know, well, you're not going to be able to do it. So start
Yeah.
out with 5 minutes, and then after a while, go to 10, and work your way up to a couple hours. You're not going to go from 0 to 2 hours right away. So it's like any discipline. It takes practice. You start small, and you make gradual improvement.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. We do want to make sure that we do know how folks can get a hold of you. drrogerhall.com. He's got a wealth of information here, including the books that he's authored, including one more coming up. Weeks, months, Dr. Hall?
Probably months. Probably months. Yeah.
And of course, just peruse the website here. He's got other resources that I'll let him share with you. I know you're like your 2 cents and whatnot.
Yeah, so if you're interested, you can sign up on the website, drrogerhall.com, drrogerhall.com. I have a daily quote of the day called the Daily Dose of Mental Marinade. Every week I have usually a video that comes out. It's a short 30-second, 1-minute video called Roger's Two Cents. You can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram. You can, I suppose you can follow me on Facebook if people still do that. But you can find me at those places on LinkedIn. But if you'd like to buy the books, go on Amazon and look up Roger Hall. I've got an author page with my books and a little bit about me. So I'd be delighted to have you read those, and I hope change your life.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it certainly has changed my life on a number of different levels. So I'm forever grateful for that. And if you want to know how it is that we implement Dr. Hall's, skills, techniques into the perfect real estate business, and how it is that you can, just become a better version of yourself, I'd highly encourage you to reach out and see what we can do to help, and how we can develop a very personalized solution for your real estate business. But other than that, again, Dr. Hall, we want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Jared, I'm always very grateful to work with you. You ask fantastic questions.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Otherwise, we'll wish everybody a blessed one. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.